Hello and welcome to Unacademy. I welcome you all to this session. We are witness to an extraordinary event in human history which happens every 144 years, and the Maha Kumbh Mela in itself is a very important event for you as a UPSC aspirant but also as an Indian. We will discuss the history, the historicity, the mythology and the significance of this event. Why is it called the Maha Kumbh Mela, not the Ardh Kumbh or the Kumbh Mela itself? And we will try to understand how it was also used by nationalists during the colonial period. Before we begin, the Pratishtha offer of 9 plus 9, 12 plus 12, 18 plus 18 is going to end tonight. So do use this opportunity to join our course. Use the code IS English. This will allow you to be tagged to our team and you can then get one-to-one mentorship sessions from us. If you want the PPT of this session, you will find it in this Telegram channel. You should join it and you will get the PDF of this session as soon as the session is over. Now, let's talk about the Kumbh Mela and its mythology. First, the structure is we'll discuss mythology and the Kumbh Mela, then its historicity, and its role in the colonial period, and then the economy of the Kumbh Mela because it has something related to ancient trade routes also related to it. One thing from the outset, it is a UNESCO intangible heritage, which is it was inscribed in 2017, a very important moment in human history where millions of people come together and celebrate religion and beliefs, and therefore Kumbh Mela very rightly added in 2017 into UNESCO intangible heritage. This is the first fact which you need to know as a UPSC aspirant, which can come in the examination because it is in the news. It will remain in the news for the next 1 month. Now, Kumbh Mela this time is happening at a scale which we've not seen previously, and because of certain astronomical and astrological coincidences, this is happening after 144 years, and it will happen again after 144 years, and that is where it becomes extremely significant, and that is why it is called Maha Kumbh Mela. It is not called Kumbh Mela. Kumbh Mela happens every 12 years. Ardh Kumbh Mela happens every 6 years, but Maha Kumbh Mela happens every 144 years because of the alignment of the moon, the sun, Jupiter, and you can say the alignment with the earth itself. So sun, moon, Jupiter with alignment with the earth in turn produces a certain astronomical and astrological significance, which in turn leads to this certain type of, you can say, moment which is celebrated as the Maha Kumbh Mela. Now, what is the story behind it? And we have one dance form which is also related to it. The Kumbh word itself refers to the pitcher, which is called the Amrit pitcher. And it is related to what is called as the mythology of the Samudra Manthan, which is the churning of the ocean, in which the Devas and the Asuras, the good and the bad together, had to churn the ocean. And in this process, first came out wish or poison, which is then consumed by Lord Shiva, which in turn leads him to be called as Nilkant because he holds the poison here. Further, we have other aspects related to what came out of the ocean, but the last thing which came out was Dhanvantri, God Dhanvantri, along with the pitcher of Amrit. And as soon as this pitcher was available to the Devas and the Asuras, the Devas did not want the Asurs to consume this Amrit, this immortality potion, because it would then make them in a way immortal. You could not kill them. And therefore what happens is Jayant, who is considered to be the son of Indra, takes this pot and runs. The sun, his son Shani, which is the Brihaspati or planet Jupiter, along with the moon, now run with Jayant in order to protect this pitcher. That is why sun, Jupiter, moon are the planets and the celestial bodies which are associated with the Maha Kumbh itself. Now, what is the story behind the places itself? Now, in the process of running, Jayant spill 4 drops of this Amrit at 4 places. One at Haridwar, the other one at Prayagraj, one at Ujjain, and then at Nasik in Triambakeshwar. Because he ran for 12 days and 1 day in mythological sense of the Devas equal to 1 year of humans, the Kumbh Mela therefore happens every 12 years. And the relative position of the sun, moon and Jupiter together decide where it is going to happen. And every 6 years you have the Ardh Kumbh, which is the Prayagraj and Haridwar sector. Every 12 years, it is called Purv Kumbh or Kumbh itself. And every 144 years, the significance of this 144 is that the sun, moon, earth and Jupiter are in a certain straight line, which happens only 144 years. What is interesting is 12 years in earth time is also the time which is taken by Jupiter to revolve around the sun itself. So it is basically related to Jupiter and its movement around the sun and the relative movement of the earth and the moon vis-a-vis these planets and the sun itself. And therefore, this what we call as historical juncture, this nakshatra is produced because of the astronomical convergences of these what we call as planets. So there is not just a mythological aspect here, there is also an aspect of what we call as astronomy and astrology. Now, all of the kumbhs happen next to rivers or on river banks. Haridwar, it is Ganga. At Prayagraj, previously called Allahabad, you have Sangam, which is Ganga and Yamuna meeting together in order to produce the mythical Saraswati. At Ujjain, it is Shipra. And at Nasik, Triambakeshwar, it is Godavari. All of these rivers have importance mythologically also because they all are considered holy in the larger concept of Hinduism. Now, how this process will go through, in which city it will happen, all of it is decided by the relative position of these three planets, Jupiter, Sun and the Moon, along with the Earth itself. And the city is also decided according to what is the position. Now, this is where we go in from what we call as astronomy into astrology. But just to give you a little bit of curious fact, based on where Jupiter is sitting astrologically into a certain what we call a sun sign, it will decide where it will happen. For example, if Jupiter is in the Aquarius sun sign or Kumbh Rashi and Sun and Moon are in Aries and Sagittarius, it will happen in Haridwar. Don't have to learn this, but something quite interesting. It has its own logic, which is quite interesting. If Jupiter is in Taurus, Sun and Moon are in Capricorn, then it will be in Prayagraj. Thereafter, if Jupiter is in Leo, which is Simha, and Sun and Moon in Cancer, it will happen in the Triambakeshwar Nasik sector. That's called Simhansa Kumbh. So we have now three different types of kumbhs. Ardh Kumbh, 6 years. We have Kumbh, which is 12 years. And we have Maha Kumbh, which is on the alignment of the Sun, the Moon and the Jupiter in a certain line. And therefore, in turn leads to the Maha Kumbh, which only repeats itself 144 years. Most probably in our generation, this is the only Kumbh which we will see. Thereafter, after 144 years, the same type of astronomical and astrological conditions will come through. Now, this is the story. This is the significance in Hinduism, in astronomy, in astrology, and the mythological logic. The Samudra Manthan is also related to Mohiniyattam dance, because if you know that Lord Vishnu took the avatar of Mohini in order to make sure that he could deceive the Asuras and give the immortality potion to the Devas and not the Asurs. So we have one dance form also related to this. Mohiniyattam and Kumbh Mela both are related to, in a way, the Samudra Manthan story, and this is the mythological significance. Now, what do you mean by the historicity of this Mela? Meaning, where do we find reference to this Mela in historical texts? What are historians talking about it? And where do we see the crystallization of the four places with these rivers, along with how was it documented in history? This is a very interesting aspect. Now, from the outset, if you go today to the Kumbh Mela and say, why are we doing this? Where is it written? They will talk about a Puran which is called Skand Puran. They will say that the Skand Puran, which was produced during the post-Mauryan Gupta period, has reference to the Kumbh Mela. What is the logic to it? And all of what I taught you, the mythology related to it, which is Samudra Manthan, the spilling over by Jayant into four places, which in turn leads to the Sun, Moon and Jupiter running after Jayant, which in turn leads to this convergence which produces the Kumbh Mela itself. They say that it is mentioned in the Skand Puran. Now, most probably this is the most authoritative text which is used by everyone. But we have certain other references also, and certain historians which also talk about the structure of this Mela its logic evolving over a period of time. This is where we are going out of the mythological space into the historical space, and we have 5 very interesting references or perspectives on the Kumbh Mela itself. It is believed that Yun Sang, who came to India as a Chinese traveler, mentioned a grand fair, most probably either the Kumbh Mela or the Magh Mela, in 7th century CE, and people argue that what Yun Sang was actually describing in Prayagraj, the Allahabad sector, or now Prayagraj, was basically the Kumbh Mela happening. So it is believed that this is one of the first references we get in a foreign traveler's account of this Mela happening, and he talked about the fervor and the grand scale of it. But there are Magh Melas also which happen in Prayagraj. Therefore, there is a little bit of confusion. Was it Kumbh Mela or was it Magh Mela? Thereafter, there is a Professor Girja Shankar Shastri from the BHU who talks about a very interesting concept, which is that Skand Puran is quoted as the most important text which tells us about the Maha Kumbh. However, he says that yes, the Skand Puran talks about the Samudra Manthan. Yes, the Skand Puran talks about the picture of immortality. It talks about Amrit. However, somehow the versions which we have today of the Skand Puran, they do not mention the Jayant story and the spilling of the 4 drops at Haridwar, Nasik and Ujjain with Prayagraj, which is where, coming from an authoritative space where he's written multiple books about it, he says that Skand Puran, older versions have reference to it, but we don't have the copy of that Skand Puran itself. The Skand Puran, the extant versions which we have today, refer to Samudra Manthan, but don't refer to the Maha Kumbh Mela. Therefore, there's a little bit of a complicated historical reference to it. It doesn't mean that it is not present in the Skand Puran, but the problem is the version of the Skand Puran which was documented somehow does not talk about it. Now, vis-a-vis this, we have the Gita Press Maha Kumbh Parv text. This text says that whilst this is related to Skand Puran, this is related to a foreigner's account itself, the Gita Press text says that the Rig Veda itself talks about the benefits one gets by basically taking a bath in the Maha Kumbh Mela, which is the punya which you get, the ritualistic merit, and in the same way all your sins are washed off. So somehow the Gita Press with its own set of texts says that the Rig Veda itself, in the version we have today and the version which they refer to, there is reference to the Kumbh Mela and the benefits of using the Kumbh Mela as a moment of what we call as ritualistic purification. But what is properly established is 2 things which is related to a very important Bhakti saint, Adi Shankaracharya or Shankara, and a very authoritative historian coming from the Allahabad University itself, Professor D.P. Dubey. Now, it is believed, and this is where historical consensus is there, whilst Professor Girja Shankar Shastri is complicating the Skand Puran argument, Yun Sang is also historically consensus is that more or less it was defining the Kumbh Mela itself. Gita Press tries to push it further back. It is very well established by everyone that Adi Shankaracharya is the one who in 8th century CE, during the Bhakti movement, crystallized this Mela into what it is today, meaning the 4 places, the rivers, and the structure, where you have the Shahi Snans which happen, in which the akhadas of the sannyasis are a very important part of this Mela, where the first bath they take is the Shahi Snan and the different types of snans which happen. This is where he says that this became a congruence, or you can say congregation of sannyasis, of scholars, of people together, and this used to disseminate knowledge, ideas, and the concepts of Hinduism. And therefore, Adi Shankaracharya was the one in 8th century CE who created this structure in which the Kumbh Mela now is seen. The astronomical and astrological significances and the mythology was well established, but there needed to be a certain structure. That structure came through Adi Shankaracharya. The same aspect is what Professor D.P. Dubey talks about, which is that Ganga river has always been a very important, you can say mythologically, historically and geographically also a very important river. There are multiple melas which used to happen in and around it. And it is during this 8th to 12th century period, the Bhakti movement, which starts in South India, then reaches the North India. It is during the Bhakti movement that the Kumbh Mela, the Ardh, the Purv, and the larger concept of Maha Kumbh Mela all come together to produce a structure which we follow today. And there lies the Bhakti movement as a very important process of crystallization. Doesn't mean that previously it was not happening, but the structure, the form, and everything in and around it, which are the rules and regulations which come through, were crystallized in the Bhakti movement with God becoming more accessible, with devotion and love to God becoming more and more common. So basically, there are now convergences. Professor D.P. Dubey also talks about how during the Mughal period, we have records of sannyasi akhadas being registered, being sanctioned spaces in and around this sector. So therefore, by the time we come to the early medieval period, it is a properly established tradition. And as we know it today as the Maha Kumbh Mela is very well established by 12th, 13th century, and by 15th, 16th century, it is done with pure fervor. So the first part of the discussion was related to the Samudra Manthan, the mythology behind it, and the astronomical and the astrological significances, which is the movement and the alignment of the sun, moon, Jupiter, and earth. On the other hand, this part was to, in a way, add a little bit of nuance as a UPSC aspirant on where do we find references. Yun Sang talks about it. If according to the Gita Press, Rig Veda has a reference to it. G.S. Shastri talks about the Skanda Puran, the Samudra Manthan story. We have Mohiniyattam as a reference also. But he tries to complicate the Skanda Puran by saying that there is no reference to the 4 drops itself. Adi Shankara and Professor D.P. Dubey. Adi Shankara's role in establishing it during the Bhakti movement, and Professor D.P. Dubey is considered an authority. He's written multiple books on the Kumbh movement, Maha Kumbh itself. He says that it is actually based on the concept of the Bhakti movement period. There's a crystallization of the structure itself. So I hope that you understand the first and the second part, which is the mythological and the what we call as important aspects on which UNESCO gave Kumbh Mela the intangible heritage tag, why there is so much fervor and enthusiasm, and why is it so important in our own beliefs and traditions itself. Second part was to give you, as a UPSC aspirant, the historicity of this Kumbh Mela. Where do we get references? But we have a very interesting story behind the Kumbh Mela and how it was used during nationalism. This is a very interesting aspect which people don't really talk about. But during the national movement, Allahabad, which is now Prayagraj, was a very important city developed by the British itself. Thereafter, once Agra became obscure, and after 1857, the importance of Prayagraj and Allahabad became very important. And thereafter, we have references to the melas with regards to CDM, with regards to the Swadeshi movement, which I want to discuss as a way of explaining to you how these melas play a very important role in colonial India. This can come as a mains question where they can converge art and culture and modern India together in what was the role of religion in national movement, what was the importance of melas in national movement, what is the importance of culture in national movement. Anywhere you should write about this topic itself. Now, Prayagraj, previously known as Allahabad, became a very important center, later the capital after 1857. 1857, multiple theatres, North India ravaged, British destroyed most of the cities in the process of taking them back. And the northwestern province, which was now being developed, was the capital was Prayagraj or Allahabad. And this city was planned in such a way that the European population could stay there, and it basically transformed from a mufassil town, small town, or a town which had a substantial population, to the Queen of the North. Before Delhi is identified as a very important space by 1911, it was Calcutta and Allahabad. That is why the first simultaneous examination of the ICS also happened in Allahabad, which is Prayagraj. And therefore, it's a very important center, and it was seen to be a formally planned city in British India by the British itself. But Prayagraj and Allahabad also has multiple significances other than that, because it became the seat of government and public life for the British. The High Court will come up with by 1867. Thereafter, the Muir Central College by 1877. and the Allahabad University by 1887. So therefore, by 1890s, it had become a very important center. But if I push back your understanding, you would also know about something called the Victoria's Proclamation after 1857 revolt, which was on 1st November 1858. That was done. The proclamation was read in what is today called as Malviya Park, named after Madan Mohan Malviya, a very important personality of the national movement coming from the same sector itself. And therefore, that is considered by Madan Mohan Malviya as the Magna Carta, where the British said through Victoria's Proclamation, by Queen's Proclamation, we will not deal with religion, because that in turn produced the revolt of 1857. And therefore, somehow there is a certain convergence. At the same point of time when the British did not want to deal with religion because they thought that that in turn led to the revolt of 1857 itself, Allahabad or Prayagraj will thereafter become a very important city in the larger nationalism story. And this is where the Kumbh Mela started to play a very important role in disseminating nationalism. Because the British said that we will not interfere in the religious aspect, Kumbh Mela now become a very important way in spreading the ideas of nationalism. And we have references to multiple Kumbh Melas which are very important. For example, the 1907 Magh Melas and the Kumbh Mela being very important. In Kumbh Melas, the Congress, the INC, used to establish its permanent camps, used to distribute pamphlets, further used to talk to the sannyasis. Sannyasis themselves played a very important role. It is believed that with sannyasi revolt happening very early in the national movement itself, very early in Indian history itself during the modern period, sannyasis were a very important way of spreading anti-imperialistic ideas. Sannyasis played a very important role in spreading the concept of nationalism. In 1907 Mela, the British intelligence reports tell us that they were very nervous because Bal Gangadhar Tilak was present in the 1907 Mela itself, and later Gopal Krishna Gokhale will also attend this Mela. This is where these personalities are associated to the British anxiety with regards to nationalism, and throughout the 20th century, there will be multiple moments. Another very important, you can say, Mela is the 1931. In the 1931 non-cooperation movement, it played an important role in spreading the message, but in 1930, the civil disobedience idea was spread in the Allahabad sector or the Prayagraj sector via the camps which were set up in the Maha Kumbh Mela. People were coming through, and people had developed a certain political consciousness also, that once they used to come to the Maha Kumbh Mela or the Kumbh Mela itself, they used to also go and meet the nationalist leaders. And in 1930, we know that the sannyasis were spreading the message of civil disobedience. Further, in 1930, it is believed that the Sharda Act, which was passed in 1929, which is related to the marriageable age of boys and girls, the British used to use the Kumbh Mela to spread, you can say, historical understanding, or at least awareness about legislations and laws which they brought through. So we know that the British used to use the loudspeakers which were available at that given point of time in 1930 to talk about the Sharda Act, about women's reform. At the same point of time, the nationalists were using this as a way of spreading the message of nationalism. So if you actually look at it, the Kumbh Mela is not just a moment of religious fervor. It has previously been used to crystallize the Bhakti movement, further to spread nationalism, used by leading nationalists who therefore used to go into these melas, talk to people. Sannyasis used to transmit anti-imperialistic fervor and feeling, and that is where the British were extremely nervous with regards to the sannyasis, because they move around and they spread message. And this is where the Maha Kumbh Mela, Kumbh Melas, the Ardh Kumbhs and the Kumbh Mela itself became a moment of people coming together, religious knowledge being disseminated, but nationalism also disseminating. This is where you have to understand that if a question comes to about culture and modern India, culture and nationalism, you have to talk about this concept. That is why I'm doing this session, because I believe and we believe that it is an important moment where we can now get a little bit of a tricky question. You can talk about the Shivaji festival, you can talk about the Ganpati festival, you can talk about the Kumbh Mela also, where we have a lot of, you can say, research happening about it, how it evolved during the 19th century, 20th century, how it came through and crystallized during the Bhakti movement itself. So at this point, I'll try to close the historical part. Just one aspect which I want to add for this UNESCO intangible heritage is the economy of the Kumbh, which is the amount of employment, money it generates. But before I talk about the recent, you can say, trends, during the Kumbh Melas, we have found Venetian coins and European toys being sold. So as it turns out, Kumbh Mela throughout history was also a moment in which the locals and multiple merchants used to see it as a moment of commerce and a place of commerce. This is where commerce and Kumbh Mela go together, wherein we have people coming from the European sector selling commodities, and the list of commodities which was sold were also in a way linked to nationalism. Previously, you had more European, you can say, toys and artifacts. Later, it became more and more cultural, Indian culture related, nationalistically related. We had Bharat Mata paintings, Bharat Mata pamphlets being sold and distributed. And this is where Kumbh Mela and its commerce also played a very important role in giving boost to Swadeshi. Now, when we talk about this year, it is happening at a grand scale. 549 projects with 6,990 crore being pushed by the government of UP. And in comparison to this, when it happened in 2019, which is the Kumbh Mela, not the Maha Kumbh Mela, the budget was close to half. And we have 7,000 vendors, 100 homestays, 2,200 tents. We have VIP ghats, we have boats, we have a certain commercialization, and the amount which it can generate for the state has been estimated at 2 lakh crores for the impact on UP's economy, and the official estimate is that close to 2,500 crore will be generated as revenue. This is where we have to understand that these intangible heritages, these melas just don't have one aspect, they have multifaceted understanding. So before I close this session, I wanted to have a very brief and important and detailed, you can say, discussion with regards to what is important for the examination. I hope that you understand the mythological origin, why 144 years is being used as a very important reference point, why the concept of 12, 12, 12, because that is the time which the Jupiter takes in and around the sun itself. We also know the historicity. Where do we find historical references to this? There's another set of historiography or history written about it in the colonial period. I've tried to give you an efficient, coherent picture of that. Thereafter, because modern India and culture is considered very important, something which comes in the mains examination, you can expect a question here, but I'm trying to tell you how Swadeshi, the concept of CDM, the concept of even the British using it as a moment of spreading information to the people, and above and all, the faith, the people, the sannyasi akhadas, the way this different forms of knowledge systems come together. But previously in the Uttarpath, it was a very important point of commerce. We have, you can say, multiple merchants coming from the European sector and selling commodities here. During the national movement, it was about Swadeshi. And today, it is a symbol of unity. It is a symbol of India's diasporic culture. It is the symbol of India's soft power. We have personalities, for example, Steve Jobs' widow being here. And we have so much coverage across the world. This is not just the festival of humankind. It is not just a festival of Hinduism. It is a festival which brings everybody together. It brings in a lot of revenue. It gives employment to people. It is an intangible heritage which we need to protect. But I hope now, through this session, you are cognizant of all the aspects, be it history or significance. Thank you so much. I will see you in another session. Take care and bye-bye.